Storebound is one of those games that sounds great on paper, but how it actually plays is what really matters. I'm Alex, and this is It Worth It? So the idea behind Storebound is pretty simple. It's an early access co-op horror game where you and up to two friends are just regular shoppers trapped inside a massive megastore, trying to find a way out before the employees turn dangerous. Right now, there are 2 episodes available, which the developers say add up to around 2 hours of gameplay, depending on difficulty and how quickly you solve the puzzles. The game leans heavily on light and teamwork. You're moving through the store looking for tools and fuses to keep the lights on, because once things go dark, enemies start appearing and your sanity becomes something you actually have to think about. Communication is meant to be a big part of that. You've got proximity voice chat when you're close together and walkie-talkies when you split up, which makes it clear the game wants coordination and caution rather than just charging through. To keep runs from feeling the same, Storebound promises replayability through randomized item and obstacle placement, with more episodes planned as it continues through early access. At its core, Storebound is pretty straightforward. You move through the store, room by room, searching for fuses and tools to keep the lights on, because light is what keeps both the enemies and your sanity in check. While you're doing that, you're solving simple puzzles to open new areas, avoiding monsters rather than fighting them, hiding when you need to, and trying not to get caught in the dark. Once you power an area back up, you push forward, repeat the process, and work your way towards the exit. The pressure is meant to come from managing light. As your sanity drops, the world becomes more dangerous. Enemies start appearing more often, and you're supposed to stay coordinated with your team, choosing when it's safe to move and when it's better to slow down. Loading into Storebound feels familiar at first. It looks like exactly what you'd expect a big retail store to look like, but something about it is immediately off. It feels slightly wrong, almost like the place exists in a different dimension. As you start searching around, it feels like the store has been used long before you arrived. Notes are scattered around the environment, hinting at other shoppers who were trapped here before you, and it gives the impression that this isn't a one-off event, it's happened before. There's an uneasiness to it that taps into a really specific fear, that feeling you had as a kid when you got separated from your parents in a supermarket, and suddenly everything felt huge and overwhelming. I was expecting that low level tension to be a constant part of the experience. Early on, there's a bit of fumbling around. You're figuring out what means what, stumbling across things like trap tiles before you really understand how dangerous they are. At that point, I was playing cautiously, assuming that making too much noise or stepping in the wrong place would immediately get me punished. I also expected the sanity system to be a major threat. I was moving between light sources, assuming I'd have to carefully manage it, especially since the lights went out. Like letting it drop too far would mean a quick and unpleasant end. When the lights did go out for the first time, I scrambled to get them back on, expecting that moment to really escalate things. Instead, I was surprised by how quickly I could recover, and by the fact that some enemies were already present even with the lights on, attacking once, then disappearing. Alongside a few strange moments you only notice if you stop and explore. At that point, I wasn't sure what the game was going to become, just that it wasn't as simple as it first looked. After the first few encounters, Storebound stops feeling unknown. Once you've seen how enemies move and react, the game becomes much easier to read. Most threats follow set paths, their behavior is consistent, and the lighting makes it easy to track where they are at any given time. From that point on, avoiding danger is less about reacting quickly and more about simply paying attention. That understanding carries through to how you deal with enemies. Escaping them is straightforward, with plenty of hiding spots scattered throughout the mall. I never felt especially pressured to use the tools or traps to slow anything down, because repositioning or waiting things out was usually enough. Even the sentry style enemy, essentially a large camera that triggers an alarm if you stay in its line of sight, fits into that pattern. With enough cover nearby, it feels more like a spatial obstacle than something you actively have to manage. Around the same time, it also becomes clear that playing solo versus playing co op doesn't fundamentally change how the systems behave. Enemy patterns stay the same, resources aren't significantly tighter, and most situations are approached in the same way. The main difference being communication when you're playing with others rather than any added mechanical pressure. The same clarity applies to the sanity system. As your sanity drops, a visual overlay begins to appear, gradually filling the screen. If it fully depletes, a unique enemy shows up briefly and hits you. In practice, it takes a long time for this to trigger, and stepping back into a lit area resets sanity almost immediately. Once that relationship between light and sanity is clear, it becomes another system that's quite easy to stay on top of. Trap tiles work in a similar way. Their effects are simple and readable. blocking vision, slowing movement, or creating noise. And once you recognize their visuals, they're easy to spot and avoid. Mechanically, they do what they're meant to do, but they rarely force a change in how you move through the space once you understand them. Taken together, this is where the game's shape becomes clear. After the systems click, Storebound isn't asking for fast reactions or risky decisions. It's asking for steady movement, awareness of your surroundings, and basic coordination, with most of the tension coming from positioning rather than surprise. Once you get past the first chapter, the game stops hinting and starts pushing the story at you directly. Instead of finding bits and pieces in the environment, you're suddenly dealing with actual events and characters, and it all happens pretty quickly. Without spoiling anything, the shift is abrupt. You go from slowly piecing things together to being asked to act on it almost immediately, with very little time to sit in that change. From there, the experience itself settles into a very consistent rhythm. The game talks about replayability through changing item and obstacle placement, but across multiple runs, very little actually changes in a way that affects how you play. Consumable items move around, but key objectives stay in the same place. The layout of the store doesn't shift. Once you know where things are, there's no real reason to search or adapt. You just move straight through. That stays true whether you're playing co op or solo. I switched from co op to single player and pushed the difficulty to the highest setting. And the main difference was just taking more damage. The way you approach the game doesn't really change. With that knowledge, I was able to finish a solo run in under 40 minutes, without needing perks, starter items, or most of the equipment scattered around the map. Fuses also lose their importance over time. Early on, keeping the lights on feels like it should matter, but later it becomes more of a convenience than a necessity. Turning the lights on removes a couple of minor threats, but even with the lights out, it's still easy to navigate. There's enough spotlights around to reset sanity that darkness never really forces you to change how you move through the space. A lot of tension early on comes from not knowing how dangerous things actually are. You're moving carefully because you don't yet understand what triggers enemies, how fast sanity drops, or how forgiving the systems actually are. Once that uncertainty is gone, the pressure drops with it, because the game doesn't really replace that early fear with anything new. By this point, nothing new is being asked of you. The systems don't layer on top of each other, the pressure doesn't meaningfully increase, and without that early uncertainty, the game continues at the same pace it set. Finishing the two available chapters left me more confused than curious. Not in a way that made me want answers, more in a way that made it easy to walk away. By the time it ended, the tension had already faded, so there wasn't much pulling me back in from a gameplay perspective. Even knowing there was more chapters coming later, it didn't feel like something I wanted to return to immediately. This is probably going to work best for people who like lighter horror, the kind that's more about atmosphere than constant pressure. If you enjoy wandering through unsettling spaces, taking things slowly, and you'll find with the game being pretty forgiving once you understand how it works, you'll likely get something out of it. It also suits casual co-op pretty well. If you're looking for a short horror game to play through with friends in an evening without needing tight coordination or a lot of planning, this fits that role. Playing together adds a bit of fun and chatter, even if it doesn't really change how the game behaves. If you're someone who wants horror to keep pushing back, more danger, more pressure, more escalation, this probably won't hold your attention for very long. Once you've got a handle on the systems, things stay fairly predictable. And if replayability is a big deal for you, there isn't a lot here that changes run to run. Once you know where things are and how it all works, there's not much of a reason to come back unless you want another casual playthrough. And for me, this is a wait. There's a good idea here, it works at the start, but once you understand how everything functions, the game stops putting up a fight, the tension drops off, nothing really replaces it, and you're left with something you can finish quickly and then forget about. Even at around £6, I don't feel like I got my money's worth. Not because it's expensive, but because there's just not much here yet. I'd honestly rather wait, pay more later, and get a better version of the game that actually has some weight to it than pay less now for something this thin. It's not broken and it's not unplayable. It just feels like it's been released far too early, even for early access. Unless you specifically want a short, low pressure co op horror game to try once and move on from, I'd hold off. And if you have played it, what was your experience? And if there's a game on your wish list you're undecided on, leave it below. The top comment gets an is it worth it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.